there's a woman who does a show called Lay's Real Talk, and she's Chinese, and she talks about a lot of Chinese issues. And I always take stuff with a grain of salt when people are like country specific in what they're talking about, right? Because they could all be tied to. You find out later that they're linked to an intelligence group, or they're part of a cult, or they just hate it, or like I think Lei mentions Falun Gong in this video. But I want to show you something that stood out to me, and I've been talking about this for a while. So for those of you who don't know, before COVID and right up till it broke, I was in China off and on for 2 years filming a travel show that never saw the light of day, largely because it was supposed to go into editing, and then COVID happened, and the show was called Explore China, and the tagline was, "There's never been a better time to explore China," which is clearly not the case, and wasn't then, certainly. Still isn't. And so it just rots in a can someplace, and it's just me going to all these different cities and meeting business people and all that kind of stuff. And they needed a host who was funny and spoke Chinese, and there's only one of us, so it was an easy audition, and I got the show, and I started doing it over there. It was great and whatever. But one of the things that stuck out to me every time I was on, like every time I was over there, was the lack of people. Everywhere I went, I was shocked by, I was supposed to be in these cities that had millions of people in them. And, hold on one second. Let's see if I can do this part. Is this where she plays the whole thing, I guess? Yeah, we'll just go to this real quick. That it should be, everywhere I was going, it should be packed. Chongqing, which is a great city, it was a lot of fun while I was there, was fucking vacant. It was bizarre. I went to the big shopping district 3 times in one day, morning, afternoon, and evening. We went back another night, and it was like there were people around, but nowhere near the Times Square or Union Square or in New York or in San Francisco for that matter. And like any Chinatown I've been in was way more full of people and busy on the streets than any place in China, actual China. Well, ni hao, Michael. 我的名字是霍光浩，我是美国的演员. There you go. 戏剧演员, as a matter of fact. So I just said, hi, I'm Mel Sparks. I'm an American actor, a comedic actor, as a matter of fact. Anyway, so anyways, I was shocked by how few people were there. And this is pre-COVID. So after I was there, I was like, you guys will remember, I started talking about how there's no fucking way there's a 1.4 billion people in the country. There's just no fucking way. And if they do exist, they must be way out in the fucking country and in areas we never went to. And they certainly aren't in the cities. Okay? It really fucking odd. I was in Shanghai, Beijing, Nanjing, Chengdu, Shenzhen. We were in Chongqing. This like a lot of these big cities, and there nobody. Like there were people around, but not on the scale that you would expect in a city as big as that. I could go for blocks and not see a person on the street, and it made no fucking sense. And this is before COVID. And people remember I've talked about this. And so I also at one point I was I'd mentioned this to somebody when I came back. And I was just kind of like, because it was on my mind. I was so shocked by how few people I was seeing. And there was this guy who was in the in sort of the WeChat business. He was in the retail marketing business. And they did this thing about how they would, around Chinese New Year and other things, they would, because everybody pays their bills using WeChat, using their phone, right? And obviously this wouldn't count for the impoverished areas because they wouldn't do it that way. It's all, fucking coin money out there or something. But he was going, yeah, we used to see somewhere in the order of 800 million transactions. And now we're lucky if we see 600 million, meaning that 200 million people just fucking vanished. Yeah, exactly. 1.5 million in Philly for scale. Walk around the fish market in Philly where that where, you know, or like downtown anytime, like near the main like city hall area. There's always people around, just like people all over the fucking place. And yet I would go for, you know, long walks and barely see anybody. So 200, well, somebody was like, what do they do with all the bodies? Crematoriums were working, if you'll recall, during COVID, overtime. They had cremation trucks. Remember that? Now, you have to remember, the story was from China that for 2 years, the number of dead was just over 4,000. In a country of 1.4 billion people, a highly contagious disease that made them shut down their entire country and scared the living fuck out of the rest of the world, only killed 4,000 people in China. Who the fuck welds people into their homes over 4,000 deaths in a country of 1.4 billion? Makes no sense. You wouldn't even notice it. It'd be like the people who die from like flesh-eating bacteria from being in, you know, nasty swamp water in Florida, right? You wouldn't shut down all the fucking pools in the country over it, right? Super weird. All right. Anyways, this guy brought it up that the number looks more like 600 million in terms of, they used to have 800 million, now 600 million. And that was the first shock where I had heard a number higher than the number I had heard repeatedly, which was 30 to 40 million people died in China because of COVID, specifically. That in the first year, 20 to 25 million people died. And then since then, as they continued, because their vaccine did not work and they didn't take proper precautions and, you know, and it just ratcheted up and up. And in areas they didn't have time or it spread too fast, that the number became closer to 50,000 was the high end number, which is an extraordinary number of dead people. Now the number looks closer to a couple of 100 million have died and still are. So let me share something with you real quick. This is tail end of this. This is Lei. I don't know what Lei's full name is. I don't think she says. Her show's called Lei's Real Talk. And I've seen it a couple times. And it's like the China show guys or whatever, and they talk about what happened to the one China rule. That's where partly the demographic fell over time anyways. You can't get rid of all your girls, which is what they ultimately did, and have a one-child policy that only rewards boys and then not have the fucking population cadaver at some point, no pun intended. So let me see if I think this is part of the point. But if you just listen to certain people, you're like, oh, okay, I don't know how much I believe their numbers. The Falun Gong guy says that they've lost 500 million. Couple other people, and I think she brings that up in the beginning, which makes me go, does she listen to the Falun Gong dude? I don't know, whatever. But I'll show you here. Let's see if this makes
only 660 million. And the official population in 2023.
Hold on. Here you go.
That China ever had under the CCP in 1961 during the Great Famine. And it's worth noting that China's population in 1961 was only 660 million. And the official population in 2023 is supposed to be 1.4 billion. So how was it possible that the Chinese had more babies during the Great Famine when its population was less than half of what it has now?
Right. Okay. So the Russians did the numbers as well. A bunch of people have done different calculations. The Russians have officially estimated, based on their economic numbers and everything, that the estimated population of China, according to them, according to Russia, is under 800 million. And this is publicly known. So you'll see.
Also in 2018, a topic concerning China's population went viral on Russian social media and online platforms. A Russian website called Peekaboo published an article titled, "China is Deceiving with Population Data," which a Russian expert by the name of Viktor Makov, who stated that research on China's grain production and import-export data led to the shocking conclusion which is that China's population could not possibly be the nearly 1.5 billion. He noted that in 1945, during the nationalist rule, China's population was 490 million. After the Communist Party implemented the Great Leap Forward, which resulted in the Great Famine, and then the Cultural Revolution, which caused countless deaths and injuries, followed by the one-child policy, 3 decades of one-child policy, which lasted from 1978 to 2015. So the Russian author asked, how could China's population surge to nearly 1.5 billion in the 3 decades? He found the claim to be implausible. So he said that by
the way, somebody was asking, she's Chinese. Lei is Chinese.
Comparing China's grain import-export data with its population growth trends, it became clear to him that the actual population is far less than the official number. And it's likely 800 million or even 500 million. Other Russian media reported that they added up the publicly available population data or figures of China's cities, and they came up with a total of only 280 million urban population. And based on the traditional urban-rural population ratio of 1:1, China's actual population should be around 500 million.
Okay, so this is in 2018, by the way. And there was a belief system at one point that China's population was going to taper off after 2027, that it would continue to grow until 2027, and then it would start to fall. And now we know, according to Peter Zion and others, and anybody who's done any of the studying, that they started to taper in 2017, maybe earlier, but this is just official numbers.
Let's say the rural population.
Also, India's numbers are real. India, if you go to India, go look at Calcutta. Look at how many people are on the street, just how fucking packed it is everywhere, even in impoverished areas. That's how it is when you have a ginormous billion-person population. In China, it's nowhere near that. Even in the rural areas, you can see long stretches of land with just a few people on it. That never happens in China. If you see people around, they're giant groups of people, even in rural areas.
Is higher, even though it's not 50-50, even though it's, let's say, 60-40, they argue that China's total population should not exceed 800 million.
Right. Okay. So she's not the only one saying this, by the way. Let me show you something else real quick. So this is, there was a guy at the University of Chicago who does this study that figures out how the GDP of a country by how long the lights stay on at night, essentially. And he noticed in his equation that when you compare those, the GDP to this equation in Western countries and open countries where you can where they have like an open stock market or they have an open marketplace where people who are doing business in the country can find out the truth about what they're selling, and buying. If you're going to open a factory there, you want to know how many workers they actually have, whether or not there's an audience to buy your stuff. Like, in an open country, these things. You can look at certain factors and go, okay, we know that they say the GDP is, I don't know, whatever, $15 trillion. And we can weigh that against how long the factories stay open, whether they have night shifts at the ports and that kind of stuff to keep it going. And when you balance it, you go, okay, this is what $15 billion worth of output looks like, or $15 trillion worth of output looks like, because the lights are on and the people circulating and how much gas is sold and where people live and how many people go to school and all that shit. And you compare all those things and you can go, okay, if you do have $15 trillion and it really exists, then you will also see all these other things. If you don't see those other things and you hear that number, it's bullshit. So that brings us to this.
China's economy is 60% smaller than we thought. At least that is the implication if we are to believe the research presented in this research paper by Professor Luis Martinez from the University of Chicago. This would mean that instead of soon becoming the second largest economy in the world, China's economy is only about a third of the size of the mighty US economy. And it also means...
Yeah. the idea that they have an $18 trillion economy in China, it's closer to 5.7. That's the same as Japan. Okay, that's you can watch you can just look up Chinese economy 60%, and you'll see a bunch of videos that people did about this guy's report, the University of Chicago one. Okay, yeah. Then, so this is, I think, the Falun Gong dude's video that they reference about he predicted that or said that they've lost 500 million.
Shocking revelation. China's population is only 800 million. In a densely populated country with agricultural land, it may not be sufficient, and cereal production often decreases due to drought, floods, insect infestations, and other natural disasters. This makes the Chinese people's fear of famine particularly strong. They are grateful to the Chinese government for feeding over 1 billion people. They blindly believe in the fanciful theory that without the CCP, the densely populated country would soon plunge into chaos. When China's position as the world's most populous country was suddenly challenged, people suddenly realized that this country even had fake population data. Is there anything that is not fake in this country?
Okay, so anyways, the dude who puts this video together, again, grain of salt, understand, that, let's see, Chinese crap, and then they actually go to the actual National Bureau of Statistics for China, and they start looking at the numbers. So as much as this dude's full of shit or what they're trying to push or how much they hate China, the reality is that the indicators all point that that's closer to the real number, 800 million. Now, again, I would put this in the side of like the maybe zone of this. And so part of this came from her, I think Lei references this Reddit thread with where this kind of started in the Our China Reddit thread about how there's the only source that says China has 1.4 billion is China. Everybody else, when they actually start looking at the numbers are all over the map. At the very least, you're looking at the most, you're looking at 800 million. At the least, it's scarily closer to 500 million. And again, there's a bunch of reasons why they're selling this, because they're competing with India for water. They've got to scare India into not taking Tibet back. And if you think, oh shit, it's still a large number of people and it's still a large army. So we'll just freak them out and make them afraid to come out just because we have the same number of people they do. They don't. India has far more people. So let's see. This is the part that I think that most people fixate on right here. Let me show you this real quick, and then I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Western countries kept gaining population despite low fertility rates because of immigration. China does not get any immigrants. So how could its population rise from 1.1 billion in 1990 to 1.4 billion in 2020? You're telling me that China gained 300 million with a low fertility rate and no massive scale immigration? Some will say that China's population growth still had momentum, but other countries like India had 860 million in 1990 and had 1.4 billion in 2020, despite far higher fertility rate of 3.0 and more momentum. Are you telling me that China's population grew similarly to India despite its far lower fertility rate and less momentum? It just doesn't make any sense. Even taking into account life expectancy does not explain things, as life expectancy in China rose by 10 years from 1990 to 2020, while it rose in India by 12 years in the same time period. But somehow China overtook India's population during that time. See where I'm going with this? Jess, I wouldn't worry about the Canada issue of not selling to New York. They just won't use a federal rate. They'll shift to New York will make its own deal with Canada for energy. And again, talk about Enron. Fear not is all I'm going to say. And I'll gladly dig into that a little deeper if you want over the next couple of days. But this is a lot of blather. Now, I do think that the tariffs going into place tonight, or in the next 24 hours, depending, you'll see about a week of cushion before there's a lot of price blowback that people start experiencing. And from that, you're going to see like a lot of people around Trump in his circle yelling at him. And it won't be us that makes him change direction. It'll be Bessent's crowd. Peter Thiel and those guys. All right. Anyways, China also lost at least millions, if not tens of hundreds of millions, to coronavirus and suffered more from COVID than other countries. And so they go through like these videos that are available, and they do a fairly good job of collecting these. It's believed that China's economy might only be 40% of the official statistics due to the fact that the economic growth is correlated with increased electricity consumption, and yet the amount of night lights from China seen by satellites do not correlate with economic growth. The Russians said that, all the people, this is what Lay's talking about, that 300 million inhabitants in the cities, and if they're 1-to-1 in the countryside, which is not necessarily the case, for years they've been saying that 90% of the population of China lives in the east, in the big cities anyways, so it might not even be 1-to-1, it might be 1 to 0.3, which is fucking nuts. And then the Japanese, let's see, is this Lay's video? Yes. So
the individuals who enforced these government policies were called menstruation police or menstrual police.
Oh yeah, that's from the one-child policy.
And now China is in a much worse population crisis, and menstruation police has returned.
But the opposite.
So on October 28th, China's State Council issued a notice titled Measures on Accelerating the Improvement of the Child-Bearing Support Policy System.
Which is so sexy sounding.
And promoting the construction of a fertility-friendly society. So from this, you can tell the Chinese government has panicked over the low population. They turned the formerly birth control offices into birth promotion offices. So the officials went from forced.
Did she just say masturbation police? No, she said menstruation police, but it might as well be the same thing, Denise, because what they're trying to do is make people have babies and lots of them. There you go. Hold on.
Women to have abortions to now forcing people to have children. Newlyweds around the country have reported getting calls from local officials inquiring about their family planning status, and if the wife is pregnant. Women, married or single, are getting calls from these officials about their family planning status. The officials who monitor women's pregnancy or home planning status are given a new title called female follow-up officers. So people were shocked to see a screenshot.
By the way, hold on. Let me see I think she has the Japanese numbers in here. Hold on. There you go.
I discussed China's population being no more than 800 million in my October 8th live stream. And I released a shorter edited version last week, and it received quite some attention. Some people find it hard to believe that China's population is
not me.
Actually 37 to 50, or can be 37 to 50%, or 500 to 700 million less than the stated 1.4 billion. They challenge my methodology by arguing that, one, we can't trust ChatGPT for calculating population, and two, my model or my method didn't factor in mortality rate. So let me address their concerns. First things first, about the accuracy of ChatGPT. Well, I know ChatGPT does make mistakes when doing statistical or mathematical calculations, and I agree that my method is very high level. You can almost say it's a very crude approach to population analysis. However, the point of my analysis is that it's a comparative study. I apply the same approach to both India and China. If the method is wrong, it would be wrong for both countries. The fact that it generated India's population within 4% of margin of error indicates that the method isn't far off. Now, about the second concern, that is not factoring mortality rate for the two countries.
This is Reuters in 2021, by the way.
Mortality rates in the study, Chinese population would be even smaller. Mortality rates are not going to help explain China's population gap. If anything, China has a much higher mortality rate. than India because China experienced the SARS epidemic in 2003 and COVID, which has lasted until now. The government has covered up.
Real quick. Also, I wanted to point out that the India was at whatever 12-year growth in their mortality rate, or sorry, a 10-year growth in their mortality rate, and China had a 12-year growth in their mortality rate. Like the government just made it up to sound better than India's, and yet their population has shrunk comparatively. That doesn't work.
The real casualties. If anything, China has had much higher unnatural deaths, total cases of unnatural death in the past 30 years than India. So if we do factor in mortality rates, it's not going to help explain the variance. So now to prove my point, to say that China's population is no more than 800 million, I want to share some statistics with you.
Okay, so this gets to the point we talked about before. And there's a crucial aspect to this. Like, why does this matter to us? Remember how last year I said there is going to be like gas prices are going to go down this year no matter who's president. And that's partly why Trump was promising that they're going to drop super fucking fast, because he thought he could grease the wheels of it even more so. But he's not going to. It's going to go down on its own. And why is that? Well, because there's a glut of excess oil that used to be used by China, either because there were enough people there who are alive and using it, or they were faking it. They were burning the oil just to look busy, or faking their use of it, which is entirely possible. And they were using that oil, as a smokescreen, as it were. And now they can't afford to anymore. They got too many other problems, and they're not going to use it. And they're not expanding. And there's a lot of reasons materially why they wouldn't, even if they weren't faking, which is, of course, the fact that, we're reshoring factories. Europe is reshoring factories. The Belt and Road Initiative is basically dying. And did they kill off the elderly? It's more like passive eugenics. I don't think they killed them off. I think they let them die because they're a drag. And I think there are a lot of Republicans, quite frankly, that the reason they don't give a shit about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid is because they view that as culling the herd. That part of the problem is we're keeping too many weak people alive for too long. What's the incarceration rate in China? There's no way to measure it, honestly, because a lot of people just die. Again, our incarceration is higher than a lot of countries because our people live longer than a lot of the worst countries in the world who don't bother to, they just kill everybody or they let them die in prison. That's what Russia does. Russia will never have the same number of incarcerated people, even though they have the same number of criminals, and not even on a per capita basis, on a one-to-one basis. Beyond per capita, they have more violent criminals, more rapists, more serial killers, more murderers, more, people who go on stabbing sprees and all that kind of shit, but they don't stay in jail. They just kill them. So ours, depending on the state that they're in, might not get the death penalty. And even if they do, they're on death row for decades in some cases. So, they'll never catch up with us, and it'll make them always look good because they just kill their people. This is the crucial part. The oil that was going to be used by China, if they kept up their charade, would have kept oil prices probably in the 70s or 80s as far as the bottom of the, of the price per barrel. But that's gone. That the chances of that are, slim to none. And if everybody just gave up on electric cars and went straight back to driving Edsels or cars from the 70s before the catalytic converter or any of that shit, it still wouldn't use the amount of oil that they were producing for the growing Chinese economy. So, gas prices are going to continue to contract, but they're not going to contract in a way that greases the wheels for other business, because in the process, at the same time, we are reshoring factories. We're moving factories from China to here, which raises the cost of everything made in those places because our workers work for way more than theirs do. And then once we start automating things, you're taking all the jobs that were, that we talk about sending them overseas for low wage, labor, and you just automate them here. That's the direction shit is going, no matter who's president. Now, Trump and his gang, whether they know this or not, and they're taking advantage of it, are still headed towards a brick wall. And there's a big part of corporate America that's very friendly with Trump that relies on China as a customer base. Once word gets out that that's not the customer base, and it kind of, you could argue it is, look at the number of Indian Americans who are in the government right now. You could argue that that ship has already sailed, that they're aware of this now. And no disrespect to the Chinese citizenry or to Indian citizenry in that regard. But as far as where these guys are moving their money and their attention, it's pretty clear. You can look at just the sheer number of Indian Americans that are prominent in Trump's world. That's not an accident. And part of it is that they recognize this is an untapped resource. But the other part is because they realize that China isn't what it was all made up. It's an illusion. China's economy is largely an illusion. It is more than likely smaller than Japan's, which is incredible. We often talk about how Russia's economy is smaller than Italy's, and people don't seem to grasp that for some reason, right? But think about what that means in terms of China's economy being smaller than Japan's. What does that do to the world economy? The illusion of goods that are going to be sold in China to the Chinese people that may or may not even exist at this point. Imagine if a country the size of the United States plus Canada just evaporated from the world customer base in terms of people who can afford to buy shit. So I just wanted to float that out there and have people keep an eye out for it. And you will see, whether it's through Besant or other people, you're going to see a shift in how they view stuff that will be reflective of what I'm telling you. Their behavior is going to shift, whether they admit that what I'm saying is true or not. That's immaterial. Doesn't matter if they say it overtly, covertly, or as far as the bottom line goes, they are prepping for a world where China is no longer a player, if not a drag. Just as a heads up. And all the work we were getting, the goods we were getting cheaply by outsourcing the labor to China, all that's coming home, but it's all going to be automated. It's not going to be regular Americans working in these factories. We're not going to, the jobs that were gone because they were sent overseas, when they come back, are not going to go back to Americans. They're going to happen via automation. It's almost like we did that until such time as we could, until we could afford to move it back and just automate it. And we're going to see this over the next 3 years, especially. I don't think Trump makes it. I've told you guys before that not only is he unhealthy and stupid, but there's a very strong chance that he'll just keel over. One of the reasons why is the stress of being president of the United States. Everybody recognizes that's a real thing. Trump didn't seem to feel it last time because he's a sociopath, because he doesn't give a shit. Ultimately, he didn't care what happens to other people. So it didn't matter. It didn't age him, the sorrow and the breaking point that people would go through. He didn't care. And we're not going to war with China either. We are not. That's not what's happening. The appetite doesn't exist on either side, for real. And you could argue that they'd be so lucky to have a war to use as some way of like reinforcing their worth and their economic output. Yeah, I think the stress of the reality of what he's facing in this term is what gets him, because he's not going to be able to fix these things. As a matter of fact, I would argue Harris wouldn't have been able to either in a couple of areas. It's just he's going to make it worse. He thinks his solutions will actually work, whereas Democrats are like, okay, we're going to have to play these solutions almost week to week, month to month. Yes, I'll cover the State of the Union tomorrow. So I want you to be aware of this. I want you to know that there are elements of this where Trump is and Doge and all these assholes are going to try everything they can, and it's not going to fucking matter. And everything he's doing, he thinks is going to solve it. And it ain't. Will it leave a scar? Not really. And again, like I said, it's going to be up to the blue states to salvage the lives of people in the United States. Should Democrats boycott the State of the Union? Nope. Let him embarrass himself. Again, the standing up and turning your back doesn't work with him at all. It's what he wants. And as a matter of fact, he gets to blame Democrats. They didn't show up. They wouldn't talk to us. They won't sit across from us. They obstructed from day one, all that kind of stuff. He'll use that as an excuse when his stuff fails. You got to let it fail on its own. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. It isn't a real State of the Union. It's his little fucking state of Trumpdom or some shit. It's just his little, like, his pretend one. It's his Mar-a-Lago Sotu or whatever. But he's going to be facing a bunch of shit, and the plans that he have aren't going to work. They're not. Now, Democrats know that no matter what you do, sometimes life can fuck with you. We're all aware of this. You can prepare as good as you can. You can batten down the hatches. You can plywood your house. You can do all that shit. But sometimes the hurricane just takes it right off the fucking foundation, and all you can do is rebuild afterwards. This is the reality. It's not sexy. It's hard to run on. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. Trump ran on the idea that he can punch the hurricane and it'll turn around and run away, and everything will be smooth sailing and easy. He ran as Santa Claus, and now he has to govern as the Grinch. And that is what's going to get him. That's what's going to get him. Because he's intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically incapable of understanding that his plans aren't going to work. Yeah, he's all stick, no carrot. I think he's all carrot with some people. He's all carrot with Putin, it seems. Or he's all over Putin's carrot, I suppose. That's a good idea, folks. I do think we can, since I went a little long, if Liberal Dan is up, hold on, let me put this in here. We'll see if we can get a raid going on him, and then I will see you guys tomorrow, and I'll cover his little phony Sodu. And but here's what I want you guys to know. We are entering a sort of a period of upheaval, not unlike 91, not unlike the end of the Vietnam War, not unlike, if you could have predicted when 9/11 actually happened, or the 2008 crash, those kind of things. If you knew those were coming a month out, and you could prep for them, wouldn't necessarily mean you'd be ready for everything that happened, because looking in retrospect, what was awful about them. But the things you could do for yourself in that process as it happened would be immeasurably valuable. And on our way out, thank you, Yvonne Kush Queen SST, so much for this little statement she put out. It's like a really bad reality TV show. And you know how I'm always giving advice to Democrats and reporters. Number one, anytime Trump says Russia, 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 you need to start saying Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. Why won't he release all of it? He's obviously, he was friends with him for a long time. How long does he think the average American would take to figure out that Epstein's a pedophile? And why isn't it 25 years? Because that's apparently how long it took Trump. Here's my advice to the Zelenskys of the world. My advice to Democrats: don't hire a publicist or a PR person or a messaging firm or a political firm. Don't hire one of those people to deal with Donald Trump. Here's what you need to do. You need to go find a defunct reality show, the kind that's a contest, like The Apprentice. Go find segment producers for reality shows. Hire them, and they will tell you exactly what Trump is going to do next. Walt, Trump is friends with Jeffrey Epstein for 25 years. Please fuck off. But thanks for being here. I appreciate you helping me with the algorithm. Keep defending Trump as best you can. He's a braggadocious serial sexual assaulter who bragged about being sexually attracted to his daughter. Please, just go someplace else. Try harder. You silly, dumbass child. But here's what I'm telling you. Hire reality producers, because that's what this is. Everything he's doing is he's running it like a reality show. There's teasers and bullshit, and then there's real decisions being made, most of them just for show. And if you hire people who've worked on reality show, competition ones like Survivor and shit like that, hire those people, and they will look at what he's doing and go, I know what they're going to do. I know who's getting the rose on Sunday. I know who's going to, they will know, because that's the methodology. The whole Greenland, Canada, 51st state bullshit, that's the flashy stuff for the ads. And then the real decisions being made behind the curtain. And they'll go, yeah, they may say they're going to fire this person or get rid of this person, but they're really focused on this person. This is what they're protecting. They want this person. They want Trump to be the candidate or the character or the competitor that makes it all the way through and wins, even if the audience doesn't like them. So they're going to do this, this, and this. Yeah, the Zelensky thing was so that Trump could cover the Epstein files debacle. And it's not going to work. They're going to drag it out as much as they can. But that story will die as well. Because they can't keep interest in it long enough to dissuade people away from hold on one second, let me bring this in, to distract people long term from Epstein. Can't do it. So Liberal Dan, we're gonna raid you starting right now. I'll send people over there, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Russia. The answer is Epstein. And then again, you need to know that all this blather about Zelensky and all that kind of stuff is to cover for the Epstein stuff, and it would do everybody at MSNBC and CNN and all these places to hire people who used to work on The Apprentice. Use that as the guide. Hire them because they used to work with him. Hire them and go, what's he up to? What does this look like to you? Oh, this looks like season 3 when they were really dragging ass for ratings and people decided they didn't fucking like him. Do that. It'll work. I'm telling you. So much love. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. Let me see if I can bring up my tunage, and then I'm going to run this over to our dear friend Liberal Dan. Remember, take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. There we go, and we're rating there now. Tell Liberal Dan I said hi on Twitch, everybody, and we will see you guys come the morn. Yeah, thanks for hitting that like. Do it. Hit the like. You know you wanna. Come on. Thanks, Substack people. Share that show around and share my Substack. That would be lovely of you if you feel like it.